Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. Up on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got winter storm warnings remain out here for the upper Yukon and Kobuk Valley areas, really mostly the northern areas here under the influence of the warning area. But this does extend down into the Tanana area and then eastward up along the southern slopes of the Eastern Brooks Range, includes Arctic Village. And from the eastern Koyukuk Valley eastward, that warning's out until 9 a.m. Monday morning. And for the ones back to the west here from Ambler on down to Tanana, ends at 6 a.m. Monday morning. Otherwise, winter weather advisories here for the Brooks Range on out to portions of the North Slope for the same time period, ending by tomorrow morning here on the west side, and then in the afternoon. Late afternoon, actually, or evening here on the east side. Then we've got winter storm watch out for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, Barter Island, Kaktovik areas there for actually tomorrow afternoon through tomorrow evening, or at least into Monday night there. And that's for winds that could kick up to about 40 miles an hour. Of course, snow and blowing snow with that would create whiteout conditions. And that's just a possibility right now. Otherwise, we still have the snow advisory or winter weather advisory for snow here for the Susitna Valley until 3 a.m. Monday morning, and looking for total snow accumulations of 12 to 15 inches with maybe even some higher amounts in localized areas, usual areas that get higher amounts. And that's really from Talkeetna northward or north of Talkeetna up toward Cantwell and then back to the west. Otherwise, on satellite, you can see a lot of clouds, southwest flow carrying them right into the state. We got one system pulling up here across the Seward Peninsula, actually a trough right through this area behind the bigger cloud shield off to the east and north. And then another weak wave rolling northward here to the Alaska Peninsula and keeping it wet and mild there into Bristol Bay. And then it changes to snow, and from there northeastward across south central Alaska, mostly looking at snowy conditions there. We've got snow now going on along the North Gulf Coast areas. Winds diminishing here on the southeast coast, coming down considerably. Still pretty gusty through the northern inside water areas, those channel areas, but a lot less than it has been. And clouds starting to push their way on or into the north coast late today, and that'll continue for the next, well, it'll continue tonight into tomorrow. Back out to the west, got another mass of clouds out there in the central Aleutians with low center back to the west, really not particularly strong. And the Pribilof Islands in between systems, partly sunny conditions both at St. George and St. Paul today with pretty light winds. And a break here for the Seward, or the St. Lawrence Island area into the Yukon Delta. But winds pretty gusty up here on the north coast. Cape Lisburne had 62 mile per hour wind gusts today, with Kivalina seeing gusts of 50 miles an hour and Kotzebue 45 miles an hour. So with the 2 to 4 inches or more of snow up there, that creates some low visibilities over the inland areas. And snow fell today again across the Seward Peninsula from the Bering Strait, with this trough here kind of working its way northeastward. Higher pressure building, ridging westward here. So break from St. Lawrence Island southward, actually across all the eastern Bering into the Fox Islands there. Then this weak system bringing rain, just clipping Adak and back to the west, but not making it to Shimia. So really kind of a pretty weak non-significant system out there, just cloudy skies for Atka. Otherwise, along the North Gulf Coast, increasing southerly and southwest flow here. Actually, a weak trough right through this area. but that brought snow in across, well, from the Kuskokwim Valley, where McGrath picked up about 4 to 6 inches of snow today, eastward, and usually about a couple inches here along the North Gulf Coast, following Seward, Cordova, and on over to Yakutat, with rain over the southern Kenai Peninsula. Too warm for snow there, and clear skies this afternoon reported at Kodiak State Airport. It did look like some rain was showing up on the southwest coast. Moderate amounts of rain here for the Alaska Peninsula areas, where False Pass had 2/3 of an inch of liquid precipitation today, and looked like about 4 to 6 inches of snow fell in Iliamna, as well as I mentioned McGrath, and also up at Caltech, and then farther north to Kelly, seeing 4 to 6 inches of new snow. Otherwise, still breezy, but a lot less wind over the Panhandle, mostly clear skies out to the west. As I mentioned, that weak low we'll see tonight. That gets a little better organized, pulls northward, looks a heck of a lot more impressive than it did. And a front pushes to the Alaska Peninsula, so increasing mixed rain and snow into the Pribilofs, increasing rain for the Alaska Peninsula, but winds aren't really that much of a factor. Rain into Kodiak, all the way back, turning to showers for the Fox Islands, and then rain or snow from Adak out toward Shemya. And we've got a batch of snow coming through. Again, snow the entire night tonight for the Susitna Valley, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula. Matanuska Valley, you'll see probably lesser amounts, maybe, but some of that could get up into the Mid-Tanana Valley. Winter weather advisories out up there, and the warnings here with the gusty winds due to that low along the eastern Arctic coast. And this warm front, moisture sliding east here, so that's going to bring some snow into the northern part of the southeast coast, especially out toward the coast. It stays dry, but look for the clouds to increase down south. Temperatures going up all areas there. And then for the day tomorrow, that warm front, bulk of the moisture kind of breaks off the main warm front, which hangs back to the west here. This kind of slides over the top of this ridge to the south in the upper level wind flow. So pretty good chance of seeing some snow across the northern 2/3 of the southeast coast, possibly mixing with rain out on the outer coastline. But skies will clear out after the early morning snow showers end here for the south central Alaska area and the interior, eventually pushing eastward. And by late tomorrow afternoon, probably see some clearing showing up over the Copper River Basin, over to Tok Northway, North Gulf Coast, as that all rapidly pushes off to the east. Still have some lingering snow, and again, that winter storm watch out for the late afternoon for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, if those winds kick up to 40 miles an hour. Otherwise, just scattered snow showers and practically no wind at all. Back on the west side, clearing all the way out to the Seward Peninsula. Look for some clearing for the St. Lawrence Island area, but this batch of moisture will be moving in during the evening. And you'll see on Tuesday, another low pulls, another pretty good low here develops. Actually, the one pulls back to the northwest there. Warm front surges northward here, so blowing snow develop once again for the Seward, or the St. Lawrence Island area. Eastward, just catching the southern Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound into the interior, and then behind the warm front, probably mixed rain and snow in a narrow band there, and then should be warm enough for light rain, Nunivak Island, in across northern Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay areas. Heavier precipitation back out to the west, probably gale force winds for the Pribilofs on down, and that'll be approaching Unmak Island there, and then turning to showers for Adak and Atka, and probably some snow showers rolling into Shemya. Got this weak system here develops and pulls into, well, actually northern Cook Inlet with a pretty good chance of snow from the Talkeetnas and southeastward Copper River Basin, maybe Prince William Sound, and then warming up, that warm front pushing warmer temperatures, so look for a trend. What precipitation does fall will trend toward rain. Of course, it'll take longer up the Klondike Highway there than it will out toward Sitka and Port Alexander. Low temperatures forecast tonight, pretty chilly in the teens, inland areas to mid-20s, say from Sitka up to Yakutat. A little below zero yet for Northway and Tok, and a little farther below zero for the upper Yukon Valley. Otherwise, single numbers for the Arctic coast. Really mild here in the Bristol Bay area, 35 to 40, including Kodiak Island. And for the highs tomorrow, mid to upper 30s now for south central Alaska, and lower 40s for the Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island area, even Iliamna, and gradually warming up here in the southeast coast with mid-30s on the outer coastline, otherwise 20s. And single numbers up over the northeast interior areas with 20s to the Seward Peninsula. And the Aleutians mostly in the upper 30s, but 42 in the forecast for Alaska, 37 at St. Paul, and 27 at St. Lawrence Island. Tuesday morning lows, 15 to 20 below here in northeast interior, and either side of zero, probably a little below for the Arctic coast and North Slope, with lower 30s here for Bristol Bay, and upper 20s all the way up to Nome. Lows in the teens to lower 20s for the southeast coast. And moving on to the highs for Tuesday afternoon, 25 to 40 degrees about sums it up, or upper 20s to near 40, with again lower 30s for south central Alaska. A little chillier around zero up to the northeast and the Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
You can see a lot of IFR here from the central eastern Bering Sea right into the interior. Breaking up a little bit here as you head east toward the border, but otherwise, if it's not IFR, it's probably going to be marginal VFR, especially out over the western Aleutians, and conditions deteriorating over the northern panhandle, which will lead to pretty widespread IFR over the northern two-thirds of the southeast coast Monday afternoon. Improving here, moisture moving through, dissipating, so becoming VFR. Madanuska-Susitna Valley, even northern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula areas, but not so much to the south, increasing IFR as you head down toward Kodiak and the southwest interior. Some IFR persisting along the southwest coast, especially the Kuskokwim Delta, up here in the northwest and the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And for Tuesday morning, IFR here, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, across the deltas, east-southeast across south-central Alaska. A little bit left over for Kodiak Island, but not as bad, and Prince William Sound, IFR, and areas of IFR for the southeast coast. North of the Alaska Range, areas of VFR, IFR, and marginal VFR. And then for the afternoon, see improvement up here to the north there, but still some IFR, west central North Slope, and generally IFR to marginal here through the central interior. Southward, IFR, Talkeetna Mountains, northern Susitna Valley, eastward across southern Copper River Basin, coast range here, North Gulf Coast range on down into the Panhandle, and marginal VFR out west with pretty good area IFR, or VFR, here from roughly Nunivak Island down across the Alaska Peninsula. And for passes tomorrow, both Anatuvik and Adigan, IFR to start and becoming marginal for the afternoon. And Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, and then trending toward marginal VFR later in the afternoon for Monday, and then rainy VFR the entire day. Windy marginal VFR to start and then becoming VFR in the morning. And for Isabel, IFR rapidly improving to VFR. And for Mentasta, an improving trend for this pass as well, but maybe not quite to the VFR conditions that Isabel will have, but should improve throughout the day. And for Teneda, marginal VFR becoming VFR. And Portage, IFR to VFR, so some pretty good improvement going on for most of the passes here. And then Chilkoot and White, just the opposite. Marginal VFR becomes IFR in the afternoon. Freezing levels, 2 to 4,000 or 2 to 6,000 feet here from Bristol Bay down across Kodiak Island, 6,000 feet to about the Alaska Peninsula. At the surface, north of the Pribilofs, in across southern Kuskokwim Bay, and then hugging the North Gulf Coast, in closer to the Panhandle, but still just off the coastline late tonight, early tomorrow morning. And icing, look for areas of isolated moderate above 5,000 feet here. Into the afternoon, the northern two-thirds of the Panhandle, and maybe a little bit up here over the eastern North Slope and coast. And also areas of considerable moderate, though, here from Kamishak Bay, Bristol Bay, extending west-northwest right on out to the Yukon Delta coast, and that'd be above about 5,000 feet. Jet stream, got southwest flow, 110 knots, and it kind of diverges here with ridging rebuilding a little bit back to the west and northwest as this disturbance moves over the top of the ridge, and then it'll take off down to the southeast, and definitely lighter winds aloft here over the Panhandle. And for 9,000 feet, still some pretty good winds down along the coast and then across Prince of Wales Island. Southern air sea, the strongest winds, maybe up to 40 knots. Southerlies 10 to 20 from the Gulf of Alaska into the interior. Westerlies 25 to 35, decreasing into the afternoon here as this low starts to pull out of the area and head southeastward. Pretty good winds, 50 knots across the Perbolos with that low center west of the Perbolos. About 45 to 50 here at 3,000 feet. West 50 briefly tomorrow for the AKwx area, but really diminishing back to the west. 25 knots for the peninsula. Southeast 25, southwest interior. Light winds, Copper River Basin, south central Alaska. Westerlies 25 to 30, northeast interior. And 20 to 25 across the central and southern southeast coast, otherwise pretty light. Turbulence-wise, be a little bit of light to isolated moderate chop, Prince of Wales Island tomorrow. This area up here to the northeast, that'll be improving throughout the afternoon hours. And then occasional moderate chop here in the shaded areas, Yukon Delta coast, northeast Bristol Bay.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined once again by the science liaison of GINA, Eric Stevens. GINA, of course, is the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And GINA is all about satellites, and Eric is always here to tell some really cool stuff about satellites. Now, the last time you were here, we talked about how the weather satellites can see clouds and what's under the clouds, but you're telling me that satellites can do a lot more, even protect the general public with aviation safety information.
That's right. There's one particular aspect of satellites we're going to talk about today that might not be immediately obvious, and that is detecting things in the atmosphere that are not clouds, that are not snow, not rain, but rather a hazard that can happen here in Alaska, and that is volcanic ash.
Of course.
When a volcano goes off, puts ash in the air, this is of course a hazard to the public if the ash were to fall on the ground in accumulating amounts.
Sure.
Additionally, while the ash is in the air, and this is the more frequent hazard, is it's a hazard to aviation because you cannot fly an airplane into volcanic ash without great risk. Worst case scenario, the ash gets into a jet engine, wrecks the engine, kills the engine, and now you have an airplane flying with no engines. It won't fly for long. So aviators need to avoid that ash. How do you avoid the ash? You have to know where it is by identifying it with a satellite image and perhaps predicting then where the ash will flow with the overall weather patterns. Satellites are so important for identifying when a volcano goes off and then tracking the ash after the volcano injects the ash into the atmosphere.
Now, are you talking about seeing the heat signature or a huge volcanic plume with a cloud that we're used to seeing in the really pretty pictures of any Alaska volcano that's erupted recently, Redoubt, for example? Or are we talking about the really fine details? Because this is polar orbiting satellites, the ones that are very low to the ground, right?
The geostationary satellites can do some detection. The polar orbiters, like you say, they're closer to the Earth. They give the even better view. In answer to your question, I would say all of the above.
Oh, okay.
A heat signature from a volcano going off with all the heat that comes with the eruption, that can be identified in infrared imagery.
Okay.
We've got images from the Kamchatka Peninsula. That's the far eastern part of Russia on the western side of the Bering Sea, loaded with volcanoes.
Right.
You know, Alaska has plenty of volcanoes of its own. We can also be affected when a volcano goes off in Kamchatka, say, and then the weather carries that ash toward Alaska from the west.
Right.
You can see the infrared heat signature, like you say. Also, the ash in the air can be detected by doing some sophisticated channel differencing within the satellite data. You can find the identification of sulfur dioxide, say, that's a component of the volcanic emission, and you can trace this with the satellite imagery. Sometimes volcanoes go off that haven't gone off before, and we're not expecting them to go off. Say if there's no seismometers around a given volcano that hasn't gone off in 100 years, you might not be expecting it to go off. In the satellite imagery, since satellites can be globally comprehensive, that might be the first sign that you have that a volcano in an unexpected area is going off.
That's a good backup system. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And people are working all the time on automating the interrogation of satellite data by computers to provide a first alert to a human, so the software will say, we think this might be important. Human, go take a closer look. Because the people are still the best way to interrogate the imagery, but the planet's a big place, and we can't be looking everywhere all the time, so the software helps give a first cut. And then in Alaska, there's a special kind of surprise angle where the satellites are helpful, and that is the Katmai eruption of 1912. Huge eruption. There is still somewhat of a moonscape out there in southwest Alaska where all this ash is laying on the ground. And sometimes a strong weather pattern comes along where we have roaring northwest winds that go across the Alaska Peninsula there and can actually pick some of this ash up off the ground. No volcano is going off. This was more than 100 years ago that volcano actually blew. So you're not going to see a heat signature like we were discussing. There will be no seismic signature of a volcano going off. So those data sets, they'll say, oh, no problem. But you can see in some of the satellite imagery this ash, as it's called, resuspended. When the wind comes along, picks it up, the ash can be lofted a few thousand feet in the air just with the wind. And an airplane flying into that plume is exposed to some danger. So we need to track that ash to provide guidance to aviators that you don't want to be flying here at these elevations in this area. We've got some imagery of the resuspension, and you can see the wind blowing strongly from the northwest, picking up the ash and blowing it down to the southeast. And so that's another, perhaps not immediately obvious hazard of volcanic ash. Katmai is the gift that keeps on giving, for sure.
Very good. So we've got satellites that can help us understand the weather from the past and the immediate past. And we talked last time about how that's feeding into the forecast modeling to help improve predictions. But now they're also protecting the general public with aviation-sensitive information and watching volcanoes, whether they're erupting or maybe have erupted in the past, and finding the left-behinds from those volcanic events there. So really impressive stuff. Eric, thanks so much for joining us again today. And you're a gift that keeps on giving from the satellite community, so thanks a lot, and we hope to have you back again soon. Again, Eric Stevens with Dehne at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And if you'd like to check out any of the information that Eric has shared with us again today, you can do that very easily by going to www.dehne.alaska.edu. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis today. Ice pulling away on the north shore of Nunivak Island here, pretty evident. And that same thing starting to happen on St. Lawrence Island, but to a lesser extent. Otherwise, with those southerly winds, general retreat northward here of the ice edge. And the retreat northward will probably slow down some here in the next couple of days, but Tuesday another storm rolls northward out here, so more southerly winds, and it'll probably retreat farther. So the next 5 days, look forward to continue to become less. And for the coastal water forecast, west winds on the south coast here, 15 to 20 knots, seas 11 to 12 feet. East winds 10 to 15 on the north coast, 5 knots, Lynn Canal. How's that for a change? 5-knot wind in Lynn Canal there, Stevens Passage east at 10 and northwest 10 for Clarence Strait. And for the outlook on Tuesday, southeast 10 in Clarence Strait, staying light really, 10 to 15, variable here, except for southeast 15 there for Stevens Passage, west 15 on the south coast, southwest 20 on the north coast, and swinging around to the east as you get up there toward Yakutat. And for Prince William Sound, northeast 15 knots, and the North Gulf Coast, east-northeast winds 15 to for 20 knots here, seas up to 6 feet. South 20 for the Barren Islands. Small craft advisories tomorrow, Kamishak Bay, east 30 knots. Small craft advisories also for Southern Cook Inlet, northeast 25, but lighter north of the Forelands. And light west winds here for Cook Inlet on Tuesday, 10 to 15 knots or so, and west 20 for Kamishak Bay and the Barrens. And then southwest 25, so a zone here of small craft advisory level winds, then turning south at 20 for the eastern North Gulf Coast, east 20 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island on the west side, southwest 25, otherwise southeast 20, Shelikof Strait. And for the Alaska Peninsula, small craft advisory, south to southwest 25 to 30 knots, 9 to 15 foot seas. 30-knot winds here, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, and east 25 for Bristol Bay. Those go south on Tuesday here for the Bay. South southerly gales on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Southwest 30, Cape Sarichev to Castle Cape. Castle Cape on up to Sitkinak, 20 knots. West winds blowing across Kodiak Island, 15 to 20, 5 to 9 foot seas. Fox Islands, south to southwest, 35 to 45 knots tomorrow, seas 12 to 20 feet. Good gales there. Also for the central Aleutians, southwest 45 knots, and then winds become more west-northwest and diminish as you head out towards Shimmy and Attu. Then the following day, south 30 knots out here in the west, southwest 30 west of Adak, and then minimum gales now for Adak and Atka, south-southwest 35. And for the Fox Islands, south winds 35 to 40 knots. Gales continue and seas 15 to 21 feet. Southwest coast, easterlies 30 to 35 knots, 35 knot winds here right across St. Matthew Island. South 40 knots there for the Pribilofs with that low center off to your west pulling northward. Brisk wind advisory, St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. Those turn more east-southeast on Tuesday and come down to about 25 knots. Otherwise, here along the southwest coast, we've got gales south of Nunivak Island with those southerly winds. 40 knot southerlies continue for the Pribilofs, south 30, St. Matthew Island. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, look for west winds, 25 knots, so brisk wind advisories there. Northwest 20 on the central coast, lighter on the west side, and kind of a variable wind condition, 10 to 15 knots here from Cape Beaufort down toward the Bering Strait. And then for Tuesday, east 25 there for the Chukchi Sea, so brisk wind advisories coming into the picture here. Otherwise, Cape Thompson up the west side, northeast 20. 15 knot winds mostly from the east until you get to the far east side, swings around to the northwest, but definitely looking for lighter winds on Tuesday than you'll have tomorrow up there. And for tonight, again, a lot of moisture coming northeastward, and winter weather advisory for snow continues until 3 a.m. for the Susitna Valley for more snow amounts. And winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings continue for areas of the interior here until 3 a.m. in the west and until 9 a.m. Monday in the east, with the snow and blowing snow continuing. Look for the snow to increase along the southeast coast and expand southward a little bit during the day on Monday. Otherwise, rain, Kodiak Island, a mixture here over the southwest, snow and blowing snow, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and here's the outlook for Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.